and welcome to my channel. My name is Kate, and today I'm going to be doing a tag video. I haven't done one of these in a while, but since it is now July, it is the perfect time to reflect on what I read in the first half of the year via the Midyear Book Freakout Tag. A ton of other booktube channels are doing this, and I always love seeing them. And I always love being able to participate myself, so I'm really looking forward to this one. I just don't like doing it before July because I feel like I haven't really gotten through the first half of the year yet. So I have 13 prompts that I'm going to be talking about for various things in my reading from January to June. The first prompt is the best book that you've read so far this year, and this one was a bit of a surprise because I decided to participate in a read-along after hearing a ton of hype for this book, but not really knowing if it would be a book for me. And surprise, surprise, I absolutely loved it. And that is Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. Sorry, I had to figure out the angle to make that work. I am usually a character-driven reader. However, I still usually need some plot that keeps moving things along. I tend to like more fast-paced fantasy just because I can get kind of bored and itchy if it's on the slower side. And I had always heard that this is character-driven, but very, very slow. You start off with a young boy named Fitz, who is the bastard son of one of the royal princes in the kingdom that he lives in, and he ends up getting taken in by the royal family and trained in as an assassin, but it's really his coming-of-age story. It is quite slow-paced. You start with Fitz when he is 6 and follow him in this book. I think up to him being a teenager, he gets involved in a fair amount of intrigue, especially in the second half of the book, but it's really just living those moments with him, all of the kind of emotional turmoil of being this bastard son, and not really having a ton of adults to rely on in his life. And if you love animals, I will add the caveat that Robin Hobb is not particularly kind to them. But this it's total emotional roller coaster, super character driven, and I just really loved how much Hobb sucks you into this world and really makes you live it with Fitz. It just blew me away because I was not expecting to love this as much as I did. I do think if you are a more plot-driven reader, it is a much more challenging read because it is quite slow. So there's that caveat in there, but I think Robin Hobb's prose is incredibly difficult to beat because she just has a very beautiful writing style. So this is definitely my favorite of the year so far. Next prompt is best sequel you've read so far this year, and it will probably not surprise people who have known me very long because I have a really hard time shutting up about this series. But the best sequel I've read is the second book in the Locked Tomb series by Tamsyn Muir, which is Harrow the Ninth. And I loved Gideon when I read this last year. This is a science fantasy space opera type story. You have these necromancers in space who are kind of have Warhammer 40k vibes, but very snarky, pretty edgy writing style. This one even has a ton of meme references that you get why it's happening later on in the story, but it amused the heck out of me, but I could see it annoying people who don't like that kind of style. But this picks up after Gideon left off. I really can't get into the plot line here much at all because it is a sequel and would spoil things for the first one. But I just really loved the way that Muir expanded the world in Harrow and the way that she really made me love Harrow, even though in the first book, Harrow's kind of a dick to everybody, including Gideon, and she's a little hard to like because she is so prickly in that one. But this book really gives you a better sense of who Harrow is now that she is the main point of view character, and you really get you get a sense of the turmoil that she's living in. It does some interesting things with perspective. Part of the story is in second person, and part of it is in third person with Harrow. So just know that it is quite confusing. You don't have hardly any idea what's happening until well into this book. So if you do pick this one up, definitely give it some time. But I think, at least for me, I ended up loving it just as much as Gideon. And I have now read Gideon 3 times, so I can safely say that the whole series is very much in my wheelhouse. Prompt number 3 is a new release that you haven't read yet, but you want to. And I couldn't limit myself to just one because there's a ton of new releases I really wanted to get to this year. So the first one that I will talk about actually just came out, and my bookstore actually had this one out a couple days early, which I was super, super excited for. And that is What Moves the Dead by T. Kingfisher. I love T. Kingfisher. I discovered her stories last year when I picked up Sword Heart after seeing Sarah from Brighton Bookish, whose channel I will link above, talk about it. And we're actually doing a readathon for T. Kingfisher. So if you've wanted to try Kingfisher, or if you've checked out Knittle and Bone, which is one of her new releases, and liked it, please come join us. I will leave a link to the Discord down below for that. But for this one, this is a retelling of The Fall of the House of Usher by Edgar Allan Poe. I love this cover. It is incredibly creepy, but just, I don't know, something about it just really works for me. And I will also show you the end papers for this are delightfully creepy. So you get these super creepy rabbits. And I just really, really like this physical copy. And then it's got the house that the main character is invited to. And the main character in this is a retired soldier who ends up visiting the home of a friend who is dying and finds all this creepy stuff happening at the house and kind of is trying to figure out what exactly is going on. And I actually haven't read Fall of the House of Usher yet, so I want to read that first, since that's a short story, and then pick this one up pretty much immediately. It is my most anticipated read for the readathon, so I have to hold off on picking this up until that readathon starts, so I may be hiding this book for myself. The second new release I will talk about is Ordinary Monsters by J.M. Muir. I've really been looking forward to this one because when I first read the synopsis, it strongly reminded me of basically Victorian X-Men, and that just sounded super fun. The basic premise here is that you have some kids with some very unusual abilities who are being hunted by someone, and they are escorted to a remote school in Edinburgh, in Scotland, by some kind of jaded police detectives, and it's about them kind of trying to learn their abilities and seek safety. So it sounded really, really intriguing. It is pretty chunky, and I have heard some mixed reviews, so we'll see how I end up feeling about it, but I do have high hopes for this one. And then the last one I'm going to talk about is one I actually got an ARC for, an advanced reader copy, but unfortunately I didn't end up having time to get to it, so I ended up buying a physical copy of it, and that is The Ballad of Perilous Graves. What really caught my attention with this is that it is a fantasy that is set in a city called Nola, which is heavily influenced by New Orleans. I don't remember if it's directly, so it's an alternate New Orleans, and the music, or the magic system is based on music. So it sounded really fun, and I really, really like this cover, but the thing that completely convinced me to get a physical copy of this one is it has this really cool map on the inside cover there. So I am very, very excited to get to this. I also picked up the audiobook for this because there's a music score, it sounds like, in it, and it just seemed like, since it's music based, it seemed like the perfect choice for audiobook and physical book combined. So definitely want to get to this one soon. Next couple prompts I don't have physically, so I will put up pictures here for you guys for those. The prompt number 4 most anticipated release for the second half of the year. And for that, surprise, surprise, I cannot wait for book number 3 of The Locked Tomb, which is Nona the Ninth. I believe it's coming out in September. I will most certainly be rereading Gideon the Ninth and Harrow the Ninth right before that comes out. I just am so excited to see where Muir takes this next. So if you are a Locked Tomb fan, definitely let me know what you're thinking about Nona, because I can't wait to see how Muir connects the excerpts I've seen from Nona with what we already have in the series. So, like I said, very, very excited for that one. On the less positive end of the spectrum, prompt number 5 is biggest disappointment of the year so far. And unfortunately for me, that is The Maid by Nita Prose. This is a cozy murder mystery that is following a young maid who works in a hotel and ends up finding a dead body in the course of her duties at that hotel. She is not explicitly called out as neurodivergent, but doesn't respond to things the way that a lot of the people around her do. So she immediately becomes kind of this suspicious figure for the police. So it's basically her trying to not get this murder pinned on her. And unfortunately, this just didn't work for me on pretty much any level. It's the first 1.5 star that I've given out in quite some time. So it just wasn't for me. If you want more details on my thoughts on that, I will link my recent reads where I give more details on what exactly I didn't like, but I don't want to rehash any of that, especially because this is generally a pretty well-liked mystery. It just wasn't for me. So that's definitely my biggest disappointment, because I do tend to really enjoy detective stories and cozy murder mysteries, so I really thought I was going to like that one. Prompt number 6 is biggest surprise, and this is kind of negative to a positive for me, and that is Ogres by Adrian Tchaikovsky. This is a novella where ogres are kind of ruling the world and oppressing humanity because they are bigger and they are stronger. The main character, Torkel, ends up getting in a fight with the son of a landlord ogre and has to flee for his life, basically. I didn't love this for most of the novella. I am very picky about second person. I like it in small doses, but this is entirely written in second person. And it just, I really didn't like Torkel at all. And there's definitely some snarky commentary, so I'm not sure if you're supposed to love Torkel. Partway through the story, Tchaikovsky does something that really impressed me and brought this from a 2-star read to a 4-star read. And I honestly thought for at least the first half of the story that this was going to be one of the few Tchaikovsky stories that just didn't work for me. But it ended up being a book that I could walk away respecting what he did with it, even if I didn't love the entire thing. So that was a surprising turnaround for me. Prompt number 7 is favorite new author, and that could be either a debut author or new to you. And for that, I am picking Robin Hobb, because again, I just was blown away by how much I loved Assassin's Apprentice. I very much want to get to the rest of the Realm of the Elderlings, just because her prose style just drew me in so much more than I was expecting. And I think she's that perfect balance for me where it is super character driven, but it still holds my attention. Prompt number 8 is newest fictional crush. And I remember last year I really struggled to have an answer for this one, because I don't often crush on fictional characters. Not saying there's anything wrong if you do, but it's just not something that frequently occurs to me. I do tend to admire romances, so I do like that angle of things. But this year, I actually do have a fictional crush to talk about, and that, surprise, surprise, I guess, is Gideon. And I have a little figure of Gideon because just, I love her so much. She is like the lesbian equivalent of a himbo, and She's precious, and I would do anything for Gideon. I love how contrary she is to like everybody. And just the snark level is dialed up to 11. Just everything about Gideon is what I wish I could be, I guess, because I'm contrary, but I'm nowhere near as quick with the quips as she is. So I adore Gideon, and I have a hard time shutting up about her. So there you go. That's my choice. But I did force myself for this next prompt to not pick anybody from the Lock Tomb, because I felt like I was talking about that series so much in this particular tag. So I'm going to be talking for number 9, a new favorite fictional character, and that is Josette Dupre from The Guns Above by Robin Bennis. This is a steampunk fantasy, and Josette Dupre, the main character, is an airship captain. She's recently been promoted as captain, even though women in the military in the country she's from are not actually allowed to captain ships. They are supposed to be part of an auxiliary corps which does not participate in combat. They can be on the airship, they just can't participate in any of the combat parts of it, which is incredibly silly. And basically, this book follows her taking on her new ship. She is saddled with this foppish aristocrat who is supposed to be keeping an eye on her and kind of undermining her, because some of the military leaders didn't really want her to be a new captain. So you get a lot of banter between Josette and Lord Bernat, and it's so fun. It's super fast paced. Definitely on the military fantasy side, because there's a lot of tactics with the airships and battles, and I loved Josette because she's so unapologetically competent and really, really smart, and she doesn't shy away from that. She absolutely does not hide who she is. She has a little bit of difficulty in winning over her crew because she comes across as a bit of an ice queen, but I just really loved how unapologetic she was, and just was rooting for her to succeed the entire time I was reading, and just couldn't put it down. So definitely one of my new favorite characters. Prompt number 10 is a book that made you cry, and for this I could definitely be talking about Assassin's Apprentice, because dear God, I don't think I have read any book that made me cry as much as that one. But because I've already previously talked about that, I wanted to mention a couple others. I will admit I'm a bit of a crybaby, and so it's not that hard to make me cry in a book, but these couple were very emotionally affecting for me. One of them is Winter of the Witch, which is the 3rd book in the Winter Nights series by Catherine Arden. I can't get into a lot of details here because it is the ending of a trilogy, but I really think this was the 2nd time I read it, when I participated in a read-along that Evie from She Was Only Evie was doing, and I think Arden did a masterful job of tying all of the loose ends together and really completing some of these character arcs, particularly for the main character Vasya, in a way that was both glorious and heartbreaking, and I love that series so much. And then the other one that I will mention is I read A Slip of the Keyboard, which is a collection of writings by Terry Pratchett. And this one, I grew up reading Terry Pratchett and loving Discworld. And so it was amazing to get his humor, because some of these writings are talking about fantasy in general. Some of them are talking about Discworld. And then there's a section that are talking about when he got diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's, and kind of that coming to terms with that diagnosis and the fact that he was going to die earlier than he had expected. And so it's tough to read because I admire him so much. So that definitely made me cry. But it's also a really good read if you're a Pratchett fan. I think you should definitely pick it up, because I think you get such a great view of the amazing man that Pratchett was. So highly recommend that one. Then, on the opposite side of that, we have prompt number 11, which is a book that made you happy. Again, I could talk about Gideon since I read that, reread it twice this year, and I would read it again today or tomorrow. It's my happy place. But I will also talk about Kingfisher has been a discovery for me. I binge read a bunch of Kingfisher's books in May, and I love her banter, her humor, her flawed characters they really bring me so much joy. I always feel like I'm just having a fun, cozy read anytime I pick up one of her books. That said, I've only read her fantasy. I've not read any of her horror yet, which I imagine might be a little less cozy. But Kingfisher is definitely one of the authors I know that I can just pick up their books and I'll have a great time. And prompt number 12 is the most beautiful book you have bought or received this year. And for that, I have 3 books because I couldn't limit myself to just one. The first one I'll talk about is a little on the creepy side, so I understand if you don't think it's as pretty as I do, but that is The Bone Orchard by Sarah A. Muir. And I love the combo of these flowers with the skeleton hand. There are some creepy little mushrooms in there, and I really love just kind of the way this cover, or the title, stands out on the cover. I just absolutely love the look of this book. It is a kind of dark fantasy as far as I understand it. I've not read it yet. Where you have a courtesan as the main character who has to investigate the death of the emperor and find his murderer in order to be able to be set free and live her own life. So this just looks great to me. The second one I'll mention is a fantasy that I initially got very interested in because I love the work of the illustrator who did the cover for the European version of this. The US version is okay, I guess, but it's nowhere near as good as this. And it is Queens of the Weird by Tamandra Whitecastle. The illustrator is Tommy Arnold, and he's done the covers for Murderbot, for The Locked Tomb, a number of other things. He's just very, very talented, and I love this art on the front with these 2 badass Viking shield maidens. The other thing I really like is that at the start of each chapter, it has this stylized Viking art, and I just think it's such a gorgeous copy of the book. It is heavily based on Kings of the Wild. It's basically if Kings of the Wild was set in a Viking world with these badass Viking shield maidens who are moms and need to rescue one of their own daughters. So it just sounds super, super fun. I have started this, but unfortunately have not been able to devote enough time to it, so I'm hoping to finish it in July. Then the last one I'm going to talk about for beautiful cover is this version of The Stardust Thief. I like all of the versions of The Stardust Thief, but as a huge fan of the color purple, I am particularly fond of this Fairy Loot edition, which has a sweet purple spine, and then the sprayed edges, and the physical book itself. So this is the physical copy. It is so pretty. And here's the backside. And then it has these gorgeous end papers. And then also on the back. So I really, really like the look of it. It is a Middle Eastern inspired fantasy that is, I think, based on 1001 Nights. And all I know is that the main character has a djinn bodyguard, and I think is hunts and sells illegal magic and ends up having to help out do a task for the king. So it sounds really interesting. I have heard great things about this book, so I am definitely looking forward to getting to that one, and just couldn't resist the pretty version of it. The final prompt is, what books or series do you want to read by the end of the year? And for that, I have several. I have a very long list, but these are the priorities for me. One of them I've already mentioned is the Farseer series by Robin Hobb. I read Assassin's Apprentice toward the beginning of the year. Unfortunately, I couldn't keep up with the read-along because it is such an emotional roller coaster. I kind of need to be in the right mood for that. But I definitely want to finish out that series by the end of the year. I also would really like to get to the Greenbone saga. My boyfriend was kind enough to get me the fancy Illumicrate editions of these, even though I haven't read the series just because they are so pretty, and I've heard great things. As far as I understand it, the plot is basically a gangster story with fantasy, kind of Asian inspired fantasy, and it just sounded really fun, and definitely want to get to this one. At least Jade City, if not the whole series. And then the last one I will talk about is Malice by John Gwynne. I'd like to get to at least this one, if not the rest of the series. I've heard amazing things about Gwynne. He is a Viking reenactor who has written this epic fantasy series that's kind of loosely based on Celtic history. And as someone who has been involved with historical reenactments, I just think it would be so much fun to read something from someone who's also involved in that world, and I've heard the battle scenes are incredible. So I'm really looking forward to that. I am starting this one in July, so fingers crossed, I absolutely love it. So that is my mid-year book freakout tag. If you do not have a channel and you want to answer any of these questions, I would love to hear your thoughts on anything you've read in the first half of the year. If you do have a channel, please let me know. If I haven't already commented on your video, definitely let me know about your book tag, because this is one of my favorite ones to watch every year on BookTube, just to see a snapshot of everybody's reading of the year so far. Hope you guys had fun watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!